Hi, and welcome to How To Videos. My name is Doug, and today I'm going to talk to you about basic scenery, taking your scenery from your plaster to ground foam to static grass and eventually planting some trees. Next to me is an area that I've been working on. You notice that I have some photos taped to the wall. These are reference photos, and the reference photos give you a great way of visualizing what it is that you're trying to do. So we're going to take this area right here from the plaster and build it up. So if you're ready, I'm ready, so let's get started. So I've got myself a can of some inexpensive brown paint. This we're going to use as the base coat for the plaster. Sometimes what I like to do is actually paint it, let it dry, and then paint it again. And the second time is when I would put flocking on it and some dirt or sand. That gives you that texture. So I'll grab a paintbrush. Oh, make sure that you cover your track or cover any area. You notice that I do have some plastic up on the wall so I don't splash any paint up on my painted backdrop. So we're just going to give this a nice coat of some paint. Put that on there. You can see the area that I've already done here as far as flocking and putting a dirt base coat on it. So we'll give this a nice base coat, we'll let it dry, and then we'll come back, we'll do a second coat, and on the second coat, that's when we'll flock it and put some texture to it by adding some sand. Okay, so the first coat has dried, we're ready to put on the second coat. The reason why I use 2 coats of paint is, one, to make sure that I get good coverage on the plaster. Sometimes when you do that first coat of paint, you get the nooks and crannies that don't quite get the paint in them, and when it dries you have these white spots. And that's the last thing you want, is to have white spots on your scenery. The second reason is because the first coat dries quickly, the plaster absorbs that paint. So the second coat doesn't dry as quick and you have more time to put on your sand and then your ground foam. When you're working an area such as this, you want to work in small areas. So you would paint a small section, you would put your dirt on, and then you would flock it and then move along. So right here we have a small area that we're going to work. We'll paint it and then we'll apply the sand, which I have right here. This is some local sand. You can use dirt from the area that you're modeling, or it's good to match a color of what you're trying to do. That's your base color. So again, we started out with a dark brown and I have a darker sand to match that brown. On top of that, we're going to use some Woodland Scenic blend. I blended 2 fine material, T44 and T45 are the 2 that I use. And mix it up, 50-50 blend, and that's what we'll be adding to this small section. We're going to slop some paint on here. We're just going to make sure, and you can go, if you've got an area that you've already done, I go right up to it and maybe even over the top of it a little bit, because you're going to recover that with your ground foam and your sand, in this case. Dirt, if you were using just regular soil or dirt. So I want to make sure that I get all the area, get in those nooks and crannies that you may have missed that first time. But I'm going to give this a good healthy coat of paint. You want that paint to be wet, so when you apply your material, it's going to have time to dry and stick to it. All right, so we got on a good coat of paint. I like my coverage. And now we're just going to apply this sand. In this case, I'm just going to pinch my fingers in here and sprinkle it over the top of it. And you don't want to do too much unless that's, you know, an area that you're going to show and just have a bare ground. Otherwise, you just want to kind of give it a little texture. And then we're going to do the same with the ground foam. Again, I'm going to pinch my fingers and just kind of sprinkle some of that on there. Sometimes what I like to do is actually take and just tap the cup, and that kind of gives you a little bit more and gives you a little bit better coverage. You don't want to do too much. You don't want to blop it on. Make sure you get that edge where you paint it into the other section that was already done. Okay. Okay, so once you have your base coat down, which is your paint, your gravel, and your fine flocking, you're going to start building your scenery up from that point. I like using static grass. Static grass comes in a couple different sizes. We have 2.5 millimeter, which is very small. And remember, I'm doing N scale, so I don't want the grass to overpower the figures of the buildings or the cars and engines themselves. So I use 2.5, but I used a 2.5 as a base, and I like using a 2.5 for further back. The further away you go, obviously, you want to use smaller material. The closer to the front of the layout, you want to use the higher grass and, you know, the bigger trees and that kind of stuff. You're trying to create forced perspective. So again, we have a 6 millimeter that I use for the foreground. It also comes in 4 millimeter, which you can use for the intermediate parts. Another thing that you want to make sure you do is don't use one color. In nature, if you look, there's a variety of colors and textures. Not everything is completely the same color. Trees, grass, you name it, it comes in a variety of shades and colors. And that's what you want to do to create realistic scenery. Create a variety of textures and colors. As you can see here, I have some lighter green and some darker green. I have bare spots. I have some different shades of dirt and sand, all to create that realistic perspective. So as we apply the static grass, I like to work again in areas, but I like to take that smaller grass to 2.5 and just work with that, and I'll bring it right to the foreground. So I spread it out in the area that I'm doing, and then I'll take my taller grasses and work that. Now, what I want to add to that is, even though you have done an area with the 2.5 static grass, you can build off of that. You can go back over that with your other grasses and create a blend and a mixture of different grass height. I like doing that. Again, that gives you that color variation and texture. Okay, so if we let our paint and our sand and flocking dry, and we're ready to put on that static grass. So you're going to need a static grass applicator. This is mine. It's homemade. There's a number of commercial applicators out there. So in order for the grass to stick to your scenery, you're going to have to use either some white glue, or what I have is some matte medium. This is concentrate. I've already diluted some in a spray bottle. This is my spray bottle applicator, and I'm just going to spray the area that I want to apply the grass to. Another tool that you're going to want to have handy is a small vacuum. The vacuum will help clean up the area, number one, and number two, I use it to help pull up that grass to get that grass to stand up straight. You do have the applicator, and that works, but I noticed that the vacuum helps create that as well. So we filled this up with some 2mm static grass. On one end of the applicator, you'll need to have a nail or something to stick in to your scenery to clip it to your applicator so that it will create that static electricity. So we're going to stick this right in here, anywhere you can get a spot. It's already connected, and we're going to start applying some grass. So I'm going to spray the area with my spray. That looks pretty good. Get it wet, not wet so that it's running off, but you want to get some wetness there. And then it's just a matter of turning on the applicator and applying that grass. I give it some taps, bring that grass out. It takes a fair amount of shaking to get that smaller 2mm grass to fall nicely. And we're going to take the vacuum now and just kind of go over that. One thing you want to be careful is you don't want to get the vacuum too close, because then you're going to suck up and have like a crop circle in your scenery. So just take it and run that around. Clean that area up a little bit. Next, we're going to put down a little taller 6mm grass. This is right along the track. We're going to do this area in here, and we're going to do this area up in here. So I want that grass, that tall grass, it's closer to the front of the layout. Where we're not going to touch is toward the backdrop. So I put in the grass. We've got it turned on. And we're just going to start laying some of that taller grass down. The next step is we're going to want to build this up. I want to take this area and actually create some bushes. The way we're going to do that is we're going to use a product from Woodland Scenic called polyfiber. This polyfiber material can be teased out, spread out, and laid over an area, and you want to kind of keep it fluffed. So we're just going to kind of work this little area right here. Once we put this on, I'm going to flock it with some Scenic Express ground foam. It just will lay up on top of that and create that type of bush that we're looking to create. So I want to lay this out and kind of have it hanging over this little edge here to create a bush on top of a little hill. So I like that, the way that positioned there. I'm going to pull this up and I'm going to spray it again with my matte medium. And I just like spraying it right in my hand. Get a little matte medium on that. And we're going to lay that on top of there. You don't want to press it down. You want it to kind of stay high to create that kind of a bush effect. I've got it laid on there. I'm going to take another squirt of matte medium. The first time I sprayed the matte medium, I sprayed the underside, the side that was going to go against the grass. I sprayed that so I could get that to stick to the grass. Now I'm spraying the top of it, so when I go to flock it, the flocking will stick to the top of the poly. And we're just going to take a little of this material, and again I'm just going to pinch it between my thumb and two fingers, and you want to really control how much you put on there. I am just very lightly sprinkling that on, and I go a little bit over onto the grass too to kind of blend in the grass with that bush. You don't want too much. You want to create an kind of an airy feel to the bush, so it can you can look through it. I've created that bush. I'm also going to use a little coarse turf from Woodland Scenic. This is T63. It comes in a variety of colors. And again, now we're mixing the different colors. This is a very light green compared to some of the darker greens. It shows up well on that bush. And I'm going to just take and again, just with my fingers, sprinkle some of this heavier material in here in a few places. That's the coarse ground foam. And mist that. Hold it up. You don't want to get too much matte medium on. Again, you don't want to overspray the area, because then it's just going to puddle and pull down the grass, and you don't want to do that. And some of this material will end up sticking, and when you go to use your vacuum, it will be fine, and other stuff will come up. And you can go back over an area if you think you need more of it. The problem is if you put too much on in the beginning and you spray it down, then it's harder to take away. It's better to add than to take away. I want to do another little area right here next to the bridge abutment. So we'll take another little patch of polyfiber. We'll lay that on there. I don't want to spray the abutment with my matte medium. I don't need anything to stick to that. So I'm just going to take a paper towel and kind of lay that right there. We talked about having variety. You don't want to do your entire area with the same bush. Although there would be a lot of this type of bush in this area, you want variety. So I'm going to take that polyfiber and we're going to do a little area up here, but I'm going to flock it with something different. I've got the piece of poly, I've sprayed it, I've laid it down. I'm covering over this rock because, again, I don't want to get any matte medium on that. I'm just spraying this bush a little bit more. Next, I'm going to flock it with a material from Scenic Express. This is called Super Leaf. It comes in a variety of colors. And you can see that makes a pretty nice bush. Now, a word of caution. Don't take your vacuum and try to suck up any loose material around your polyfiber, because you'll suck that polyfiber right off the layout. So we've taken this area from just plaster, we painted it, we flocked it, we put some gravel on it, or some dirt. We did some static grass. We added polyfiber, some coarse material, a little finer material on the polyfiber. I'm ready to plant a tree. I have an awl. Just punch a hole and start planting some of your trees. So that about wraps it up for our how-to video on basic scenery tips. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I did, and I look forward to seeing you next time. For now, please, everyone, stay safe.